Beef Stroganoff is best served over hot buttered egg noodles. It's a rich, creamy sauce with tender bits of beef and tons of mushrooms. I like to put something a little extra special in mine. Hang tight and I'll show you what it is. Hi guys, I'm Madeline and this is Lakeside Table, and today we're making Béchamel Beef Stroganoff. When I first made this dish for my family, I was still learning how to cook. And it would be a huge understatement to say that night was a complete and utter disaster. The meat was like shoe leather, the sauce, needless to say, we all ended up throwing our plates into the trash and we broke out the frozen pizza. Fortunately, I've learned a thing or two since then, and I've discovered a few tricks that will make your meat so tender and your sauce absolutely amazing. And I'm going to share those tricks with you. Everybody is going to be running to your table for this meal. Before we start searing our meat, make sure you have all your ingredients ready to go. If you're cooking with me in my e-cookbook, the ingredients are on the previous page. And if you're hanging out with me on YouTube or IGTV, the ingredient list will be in the video description. Okay, so you can go one of two ways with your meat. You can either get a really choice cut of meat like a filet or a ribeye, which is super tender, or you can go with a more inexpensive cut like cubed beef. So either one of those, they get treated just a little bit differently. We'll start with the tender cut of beef. Cut it into thin strips against the grain and season it with salt. Then give it a quick sear in a hot skillet with a bit of oil. Make sure not to crowd your meat. Space it out or else it will steam and it won't brown. Cook it about 2 to 3 minutes per side. Okay, this is a super tender cut of meat, so it does not need a lot of time in the skillet. Now we're gonna bring this back to the party at the very end so it doesn't overcook and turn into shoe leather. And now we'll go ahead and saute up our tougher cut of meat. And once we get our sauce done, we'll put this meat into a sauce and let it simmer and get all happy, and that will tenderize this cut. Okay, come here and check this out. This right here is called fond. Fond has incredible flavor. Now, if it burns, turns black, and starts smoking, you'll have to wash out your pan. But if it's a light to a medium dark brown like this, it's perfect. So we're going to start our sauce right on top of this fond in order to get all the flavor we can. So start off by melting 2 tablespoons of butter right over your fond. When the butter has melted and the foam has subsided, you know your pan is hot enough to add the onions and mushrooms. Saute them until the onion is translucent and the mushrooms have browned. Then lower the heat and stir in the garlic. All right, now go ahead and sprinkle in 2 tablespoons of flour over the vegetables. And then we'll stir this around and let it cook for about 2 minutes to cook off that floury taste. You can see that a lot of the fond has already disappeared and some of it is still there, which is totally fine because we are going to deglaze it with our beef stock. I'll make sure that your heat is on high and then whisk in your beef stock. We'll let this come up to a boil to thicken, and then we'll turn down the heat to a low to simmer and set it aside. Now that the sauce has thickened up, go ahead and lower the heat. And if you're using an inexpensive cut or a tough cut of beef, this is the time to add it to your sauce. Now, if you're not too sure if you're using a tender or a tough cut of beef, just taste it. It's a little chewy. And it can go in there and it'll simmer for about 30 to 45 minutes and get nice and tender. Now, if you're using a tender cut of beef, I just want to eat this. That's super tender, and it just melts in your mouth like butter. Bechamel doesn't normally go in beef stroganoff, but I think it adds to the richness and the creaminess. It gives it another depth and layer of flavor. So we're gonna whip up a quick batch of bechamel. Make a roux with 2 tablespoons butter and 2 tablespoons flour. Cook this down for 2 to 3 minutes to take off the floury taste. Then whisk in 2 cups milk. Then stir in a pinch of ground cloves, 1 teaspoon onion powder, 1/4 teaspoon white pepper, and 1 or 2 bay leaves. Don't forget to add 1/4 teaspoon ground nutmeg. So our bechamel sauce is done. I am going to take out the little bay leaves. We don't need to be chewing on those later. Okay, so let's go ahead and taste the bechamel. That's really good. Now, I did not add any salt to this because I think this is salty enough. And the nice thing about that is if you add your salt later, you can always add as much or as little as you need. So we're going to go ahead and add our bechamel to our beef stroganoff sauce. This is gonna be so good. And then give this a nice little stir. Look how creamy this is. Oh my gosh. Now the meat in here is our not so tender beef. And let's see if we can taste a little bit of this. See how that is? It is definitely a lot more tender and so good. That is really nice. Okay, now for our secret ingredient that we talked about earlier, dry sherry. A little of this goes a long way, so you only need about 1/4 cup. Give that a good stir, and it really makes the flavors bloom. Something about sherry and mushrooms, it's a wonderful combination. Make sure you get dry sherry, not the sweet cream sherry. That would not be any fun. Okay, add a little Worcestershire and 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. Get that in there. Sour cream. And we're gonna give this a nice stir. Get this all incorporated. And then my favorite part, we'll taste it again. Nice. Okay, so at this point, now that we're coming to the end of our sauce, if you're using a real tender cut of meat, this is when you can go ahead and add that in now with all the juices. Give it a good stir and a few more cranks of ground pepper. Nice. And then we'll top this off with a few chopped chives. Save a few chives to garnish your dish with. Now we're ready to serve our beef stroganoff over hot buttered egg noodles and finish it off with some fresh chopped chives. This sauce, it's got just enough tang, and the meat is so tender, and the mushrooms are just like, ooh, right in there is so good. Now, if you're thinking about doing a side with this dish, I really like herb buttered peas. Now, this dish definitely does stand on its own, but I think the peas complement it really, really nicely. I also like to drink just a sparkling water with lime, which is really nice. But if you're looking for a really nice wine to complement this meal, definitely try and pick something with enough acidity and body, like a red Zin or a Shiraz. Oh, that just really marries with the flavors really, really nicely. So if you're hanging out with me in my e-cookbook, definitely check out the dessert chapter. I think maybe the berries with the creme anglaise would go great with this meal. And if you're hanging out with me on YouTube or IGTV, definitely subscribe, hang around for some more videos, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.